welcome to The Working Songwriter, the show where today's best songwriters come to talk shop. I'm your host, Joe Pug. Each episode here, we host a distinguished guest. We ask them to go deep on their inspiration, on their process, on the general ups and downs of making a life in music. So whether you're a grizzled veteran who just cannot understand why no one puts a good old 12-bar blues at track 7 anymore, or else a scrappy upstart desperately emailing a link to your Bandcamp page to a host of email addresses you purchased on the internet very late at night. Either way, this is your show, because ultimately, it is what every writer seeks most, an ironclad excuse to put off actually writing. Hey everybody, thanks for joining us again. Before we get started, I wanted to let you know where I'll be in the coming months. If you'd like to hear me play some of my tunes, I'll be in Fort Worth, Texas on September 8th at Lola's, Houston on September 10th at Beyond the Pines Festival, then down to Australia and New Zealand with Robert Ellis and his excellent band. We'll be in Auckland on October 13th and Melbourne on October 15th. Finally, I'll be in Greensboro, North Carolina on November 11th at the Carolina Theater, Atlanta on November 13th at Eddie's Attic, Tampa on November 14th at the Jaeb Theater, Jaeb Theater, Tallahassee on November 15th at Florida State, Jacksonville on November 17th at the Riverside Arts Center. Plus, we're going to be announcing a few more club shows in Australia with Robert and his band, so keep your eyes peeled for those. Also, on a more serious note, I began this show partly as entertainment for people who are music listeners, partly to serve as a document for American music that I love, and finally, it would be really great if eventually it could serve as sort of an office water cooler for the community of people who make this music, a place to gather around, and it's in the spirit of that last goal that I want to mention to you that a pillar of the Austin music community, a bass player and producer, George Reef, is very, very sick right now, and he needs the help of his musical community in Austin and beyond. Suffice it to say, to know George is to love his company, and he's made some really invaluable contributions to the music that we love. So, to donate to George in his hour of need, simply visit GoFundMe.com/George Reef, R-E-I-F-F. Or if you live in Austin, there will be a benefit concert at Seaboys on South Congress on September 4th. The Band of Heathens will be playing, Uncle Lucius, John D. Graham. Today's guest, Bruce Robison, will be playing there, and I'll be playing myself. So please come by and participate in any and all of that, and get better, George. Lastly, I'll remind you that if you enjoy the show, the best way to help out is to rate it in the iTunes store or within the podcast app of your phone. I don't know why it's important. I can remember a time where I was really sweating how many MySpace friends I had. And then it went to Facebook likes and Twitter followers. I've spent most of adulthood collecting digital artifacts that have absolutely no monetary value whatsoever, which is a pretty questionable way to spend the prime years of your life. But just trust me that it will help me to continue making this show if you both give our show a rating, and also apparently if you subscribe to it rather than just listen to each show a la carte. Obviously, do whatever you want, but if you'd like to help the show, those are two things that you can do. Thanks, guys, for listening. I had a blast recording this episode this week, and I think you'll hear Bruce is an amazing guy, and he really embodies the very idea of being a working songwriter. Enjoy. The songs of Bruce Robison have been covered by Leanne Womack, Garth Brooks, and Gary Allan. They've also been covered and taken to number 1 by Tim McGraw and Faith Hill, the Dixie Chicks, and George Strait. And he never really even had to leave Texas to do it. Born in 1966 and raised in Bandera, a small town in the Texas Hill Country a few hours west of Austin, the self-styled cowboy capital of the world, Bruce dropped out of college as a self-described lousy student and moved to Austin in the late 80s. He worked as a fry cook writing songs in his time off. It took a good 10 years before his compositions got the recognition they rightfully merited. His whole family is uncannily musical. Older brother Charlie is a recording artist who's put out albums with Columbia and Dualtone. Younger sister Robin Ludwig is a beloved fixture in the Austin music scene. His wife Kelly Willis is an accomplished songwriter in her own right, having released albums with MCA and A&M in the 1990s. More recently, the couple has recorded and toured together as Bruce and Kelly. The Americana Music Association has recognized that collaboration with award nominations for Best Album and Best Duo. He's recorded for Sony's Lucky Dog imprint, Ryko Disc, and now for his own Premium Records. The Austin Chronicle says that he, quote, should be considered a performer on par with the likes of Chris Christopherson and Guy Clark. No Depression once described his writing, Robison very deliberately sets his scene, poses his characters, and puts the machinery in motion. Then he stands back and gives them room to breathe. Andy Langer, writing for Texas Monthly, once dubbed Bruce and Kelly Texas country's first couple. We'd never met before the interview, and yet Bruce was gracious enough to come by my house on the east side of Austin to reflect. You grew up in Bandera, Texas. What was Bandera like in the late 70s, early 80s when you were kind of coming of age?
It was really great. It's a dude ranch town. It's kind of a touristy town a little bit, and it still is. And so it was a really great place. And then in the years since, it seems like a very odd kind of a place. There was a lot of music around. Mm-hmm. The touring acts would play in Bandera. All the people like George Jones or Johnny Paycheck or John Anderson. I saw those guys at the dance hall there in town.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Which was very much like the Broken Spoke is here. Low ceilinged dance hall. And so that that is a throwback to kind of the way country music used to be. It was a dance music, and then there were a lot of regional bands like Stoney Edwards and Johnny Bush, who it definitely is a national act, but he was in Austin. He was in Bandera all the time, and Frenchie Burke and the musicians who did play there all the time, including Archie Blue, who's still there playing in his club. And so it's as singular kind of as Austin is, in a different kind of a way. It's a real different kind of place where people went to have a good time.
So I'm assuming when those guys would come and play those dance halls, it wasn't we play a 75-minute set at 9:30 and then do one encore and go. I mean, it must have been a different format entirely.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, that's and that's the way it was for generations, kind of. I mean, the band would play, and then the star would come out and do their show, and then the band would play again. That's
a trip. So the band was effectively the opening band for the
and that's the way. If you saw Ernest Tubb or back in the days when all the bands still played dance halls, that's pretty much the way it was done, and because that's what people went, and they went and that even to the big stars they danced, so it shows you a little how much it's changed.
It has entirely. Although Texas has, I didn't know before I moved down to Texas about 6 years ago about the red dirt scene, which, for people who aren't familiar with it, is basically a scene in Texas. There are bands that not only make a living in Texas, but make a great living solely touring Texas through these dance halls.
Those guys, they go all over the place now.
They do, yeah.
Oh, yeah, sure. And that's been an interesting development, and there's nothing like that with that. So many fans of that kind of music and music that's not on the radio, a lot of it, and it's real grassroots, and it's really cool.
It is, and I would suppose that it would have to have been an outgrowth of that music hall, dance hall kind of culture.
Well, that's yes and no. Mm-hmm. No and no, actually.
Okay.
Most of that came out of like a fraternity school scene.
Right.
But there was I don't know exactly, but I saw it happening when I was a kid. Like Jerry Jeff Walker, all my parents, everybody loved Jerry Jeff Walker and Willie. And then, like in the 70s into the 80s, Jerry Jeff was this just real Texas kind of, and he was real popular with the younger people in the colleges and stuff. And then Robert Keane became really popular. And since that, there's been tons of bands. My brother Charlie was very popular and still is. And after that, there was Cross Canadian Ragweed and Randy Rogers and Stoney LaRue, and now there's a whole new group of artists that they're playing for thousands of people.
They are, yeah.
And so there's nothing really like that anywhere on the planet that I know of.
There is not.
Yeah,
it's an authentic scene, and it's grassroots.
It is, and it's outside of the commercial radio, and it's really something.
It is. You after leaving Bandera, you went to school for a little bit, but kind of
just a little bit, but not seriously.
Yeah. What do you think it was that about school that didn't suit you?
I didn't. It was kind of a placekeeper thing. I really just didn't know what else to do with my life at all, and I was really aimless at that point. And me and Charlie both, put 2 or 3 years in and dropped out at the same time and moved to Austin to somehow being. I guess we thought we'd get into music, but I'm not sure what we were thinking.
And what did Austin look like around then? Musically and otherwise?
We love the roots rock, I call it. But when we were kids, my grandparents lived here, and so my uncle was heavily into the Armadillo, and we knew that this music was going on here, and Club Foot was here, and so we saw that when we were kids, and so then as now, Texas is amazing and wonderful and huge and conservative place. And Austin is always this freaky little place, smack dab in the middle. And that's the way it felt to us whenever we were 10 years old too. So we knew we kind of wanted to go to Austin and really see what it was about. And we were in our mid-20s, and it was fantastic. But yeah, that was, man, the Leroy brothers were here, but I just got back into country music. The guys like Steve Earle and Lyle Lovett and Nancy Griffith and Rodney Crowell, and even though I grew up on country music, I'd kind of gravitated away from it for years, and then those artists brought me back in to country music again.
They were a real breath of fresh air at that point.
Yeah, it's amazing now. There's if you look at some of this music that was made right around, I guess, 86, 87, and it's really amazing music.
Yeah, that would have been, I guess, Steve Earle put out Guitar Town around then. John Hyatt was, I guess he wouldn't really be. Yeah, I was into that. I mean, that was part Slow Turning and Bring the Family, and Lyle Lovett's first 2 or 3 records, and man, that music just blew my mind. Foster and Lloyd, we loved the Wagoneers. They were out of Austin,
And so yeah, it was Dwight Yoakam.
Of course.
Yeah,
Of
and
course.
so Patty Loveless. I mean, I could go on and on. That was when I started going to Nashville. You know, there were people on the radio that I just adored. I thought they were amazing. Still do.
And when you moved up here, were you able to immediately just kind of fall into work playing with bands and kind of get by that way, or were you working a job during the day?
Yeah, I was working in kitchens and playing in bands a little bit on there's a club called the Black Cat on 6th Street, and I was in a couple of bands that played there, kind of on regular nights, and then started writing songs and started going to Nashville.
So would you commute up to Nashville at that point, or would you just go stay for a couple months? What was?
No, just a few days. Yeah, I made a connection with a publisher friend, and so he encouraged me to come up, and I really loved calling myself a songwriter, and so I started going up there and sleeping on his couch and knocking on doors, and I did that for about 10 years.
Wow. And how often would you go up to Nashville?
Oh boy, every couple months.
So would the idea be you wrote down here in Austin and then took songs up there, or would you go up to write with people?
I didn't co-write very much, and but yeah, I was trying to pitch my songs. I was trying to get publishing deals. What I was trying to do.
I love looking at your catalog of stuff and stuff that's been cut by other people, because all the other songs that they cut have like 5 names on them, and every one of yours, it's just your name. How did you avoid having to write with other people at that point?
Well, I've done it a lot, and and honestly, I kind of regret not being better at it. So it can be an amazing thing, you know. And I've got a couple of co-writes. None of them were hit. Well, no, Desperately was a co-write that I wrote with Monty Warden. But yeah, it's an uncomfortable thing for me. I'm not crazy about it at all, and so and I've done my best work by myself. So yeah, it's a good thing to be able to do that well. But yeah, I've always struggled with that.
Have you ever read John Steinbeck at all?
A couple things, yeah.
I think it's in East of Eden where he'll start off some of those chapters of his with diatribes before he kind of gets going. And one of them is talking about, at this point, he's railing against the idea of corporations, I suppose, as is his wont. But he's kind of talking about, he says something along the lines of, every great idea has come from the mind of one person. Mm-hmm. Now, later on, a group of people can refine it and bring it to a head. But mm-hmm. His idea of what was sacred was the idea of one person, and I think a lot of the songs that I love have come from one person, a single mind.
Me too. For the most part, and the people that really shaped what I loved, a lot of the songs that Jerry Jeff did, and Willie Nelson, and Hank Williams, and so yeah, I definitely, would agree with that. And then there was, and then I love like Burt Bacharach and Hal David, which is mm-hmm. completely different in style, but you would love to, have a situation where you have a song that really happens that couldn't happen otherwise, as a collaboration, And but yeah, I get what you're saying. I don't disagree.
I wish I've never experienced that. Being able to make something that was more than the sum of its parts. I can imagine that feeling. I used to do theater when I was in college and stuff, and with theater, by definition,
it's collaboration.
Yeah, it's a lot of people needing to hit their mark.
Right.
And that feels really good.
Yeah.
There is a weird thing if you finish a solo show or a solo song, mm-hmm. you get off stage, or that you've really hit it and got no one to share it with whatsoever.
True. Yeah, but wasn't it Roger Miller who said Picasso didn't co-paint?
Yeah, probably. I think at the end of the day, I I do land on that Roger Miller side of it myself. But what were your methods for writing at that point when you first started? Were you sitting down with the pen and the page? Were you locking yourself in the room with the guitar? Were you writing on different instruments?
No, just guitar. Just guitar. I love that about starting out in Austin. I thought about moving to Nashville or somewhere else, and looking back, I think the anonymity was nice, that you just get a chance to slowly kind of find out who you are and what you're doing, and so those songs that I wrote then. It was just scratching them out on a piece of paper and looking for a little piece of melody that would make sense of the song, and I like songs that are simple, and so that's always what I was looking for. I did have songs where you just grab onto something that the whole song just unfolds from that little idea, and so that's what I like. It's narrative songwriting. It's a story, you kind of and so that's what I see myself doing.
And some of those songs from that very first period of writing for you went on to be the most covered of yours. I've been talking with a few people since I started doing this show, and a kind of a theme has emerged that I certainly have experienced myself. There's this weird, with everyone's first batch of songs, what the fuck is it about that first batch of songs?
I think that and this is, I've thought about that, and I man, I feel just so fortunate for the for the things that happen with me, that I didn't really feel like, boy, I need this to happen 5 more times. I just felt more lucky that it happened, to me when it did. But and this is what you look at Chris Christopherson's first burst, or Billy Joel, or whoever it is. There's that
self-titled John Prine.
There's this burst, and I think that it's and I like telling stories. I like you doing your podcast, and that's a cool thing. Telling stories is something that I really enjoy, and the story that resonates with me is when people, their life is not like anybody else's, and their mix of influences are not like anybody else's, and they all just kind of come together, and that by definition is fresh and new to the person who's doing it, and even my little group of influences between Willie Nelson and Archie Blue and the Scorpions and Don Williams, and it's its own little group of things, and then you kind of add my own weirdness into it, and so that's that first little thing that's all kind of fresh, and then I think you have a story that you want to tell, and that definitely, I think, is the struggle as years go by, is to figure out what story that you want to tell,
Yeah.
And when I first started out, going back to your question about, how was I writing, I just didn't have to think about what story I wanted to tell. It was just right there. They were the stories that were just right there in my experience. And
because what the song became, just zero stakes whatsoever.
Well, that's true too. That's true too. And yeah, you often you wish you could put your mind back into that. A song like "Traveling Soldier" of mine, I honestly don't feel that I would have any capacity to write that song and be as kind of open-hearted and almost naive as it feels, and I think I would stop myself all the way along that song, and think that it was corny or melodrama or something, and I would be right. but then that song has had something about it that resonated, so you're more apt to second guess yourself later about things.
And well, that song has such a spirit about it that you just move past those things. It's like if a comic has like a really offensive joke, but it's funny as shit, they're immediately forgiven all of these taboos that they went over.
It's a fine line, man. It's a fine line. It really is. Yeah.
It is that line between melodrama and something else, but
right.
And then it can even be tough. I feel like in my creative life going forward, I can put myself into that space of being like, all right, well, maybe I can do something that I feel like it's putting myself out there a little bit corny, but then the moment I play it for somebody else and they have a hesitation to it, I crumble like a house of cards.
Yeah.
Immediately.
Yeah, there's no really way around that too, is there, for letting see how it bounces off somebody else, that's the beauty of what we do, right? Though, because the music is you never know, and people can't do without it, and it's so much fun to be a part of that, and that experience that people want to have in their lives, and when you throw a song out there, you just don't know how it's going to bounce off people and what they're going to put into it.
I can almost reliably not know what it's going to be like.
I think so. I think that's true. Or most often be wrong. And you know how that is. And people come up and tell you some completely different thing about your song.
Yeah.
And I love that. I'm like, boy, that's better than the real story.
This guy, Greg, who's played guitar with me for many years, always jokes around about like the Greg Toohey school of A&R, which is whatever he thinks should be done business-wise, let's do the opposite. Kind of the George Costanza thing.
Yeah. Have you heard that story from Nashville? Supposedly there was a producer who would go in and ask the session people the song that they hate the most, and that's how he would select a single.
Really?
That could be a legend or what, but that's an old story in Nashville. The guy, that's how he would select the singles, is whatever the musicians hated the most.
You've heard that a lot. I know that I've had that on a couple of sessions myself where, you have this thing that you're sure people are going to like, and that's usually like the most melodramatic song, if we want to use that word again, or whatever. And then, that one, we had one on the last album that in the demos I sent out to everybody, I just had listed as Dog Shit Fragment.
Right.
And that's the one that we ended up recording and giving a new name to.
Liked,
but
yeah, I've had a lot of friends. My I can't believe it. My buddies that are in the Fastball, the band, and they claimed that even when we recorded that song, The Way, which when I heard that song, I thought that was one of the most undeniable hits since We Will Rock You.
Absolutely.
And so they swore up and down that they didn't hear it when they recorded it and finished it, and they had other songs that they released before that they were sure was going to be hits, and then just the other day, my friend Jeff Hanna said that they weren't going to release Mr. Bojangles, and
what?
Yeah, he said that they released House of Pooh Corner first, and the song was too long, and they just looked at it as this crazy long ballad, and I've heard that story many times. That's really cool about music. You never know.
It is. I wonder if it's something intrinsic and undeniable about the song that always would have gotten found, or if it's in people's reaction to it that endows it afterwards with such.
Yeah, let me know.
I will. I'll get back to you on that very soon. Let me drink a couple beers tonight and smoke a joint, and I'll give you a ring.
Yeah, those are fun things to think of, and it's great. I love that too, and I've had a song that I played for years and years and years, and nobody ever paid attention to it, and then somebody else would do it, and it completely changes the way they hear it. So. It's an amazing job. It really is.
leery of writers who try to craft songs they think other people will like. And it's not because I think that's an unsavory motive. It's just, I don't think it works. In my experience, trying to write songs that people will like is usually the surest path to writing wholly unlikable songs to anyone. My favorite writers simply create, then find a way to subsist and survive until their creations end up on the right side of history. A great example of that is Bruce's song, Traveling Soldier. Written during the run-up to the first Gulf War in the early 90s, he wanted to put an individual face on the casualties of war that can all too often seem like anonymous numbers. So he wove a story of a young GI preparing to ship off for Vietnam. Bruce eventually recorded the song for a 1996 album of his own to limited recognition. But great songs don't have shelf lives. So in 2002, as our nation geared up for yet another war in the Middle East, the Dixie Chicks recorded the song for their acoustic album Home. It was only slated as the album's third single, and yet, unexpectedly, rose to number 1 on the charts. Then, on the tour promoting the album, a political firestorm was ignited when the Chicks' lead singer, Natalie Maines, told an audience in London that she was ashamed the president was from her home state of Texas. The retribution by country radio stations eager to appear flag-waving on the path to war was swift. Dozens of stations dropped the song entirely, and it disappeared from the charts. Trying to anticipate a song's reception in the world is a fool's gambit. Avoiding it has been a key both to Bruce's success and, more importantly, to his peace of mind. The couple songs that you had for Tim McGraw and then the Dixie Chicks, how those came into being covered by them and how your life changed at that time?
Well, they heard the recordings that I made of those. So I was going to Nashville. So Faith Hill had seen the video of the song that I released as a single, "Angry All the Time," and it wasn't successful on the radio at all. But Faith had reached out about doing some shows or something. So we knew she was aware of us and of the song, and so yeah, her husband just kind of, he, in his words, just kind of took it away from her and recorded the song. So, but that's the way all those songs were with me. I had 4 songs, and they were all. I made a few records for Sony that bounced around Nashville a lot, and some of the A&R people knew about the songs, and then some of the artists did. The Chicks, we were on the same label, and so they had heard "Traveling Soldier" from me, and so yeah. But I never had really much luck, with going through the channels and stuff. The people kind of heard them off of my records, and yeah, it certainly did change my life as a really wonderful and amazing thing to make you feel better as a songwriter. And George Strait was in Bandera, Texas, is just a mythical character, pretty much. Yeah. And so to have him record a couple of my songs was it never gets old. Whenever I play those songs, and just felt so fortunate in the respect that I have for him, and Leanne Womack did 4 or 5 of my songs, and none of them were hits, but I just think she's as good her and Kelly are the best country singers there are on the planet, pretty much, and so. It's just, man, being a songwriter, as you know, is an amazing job, and then when your songs find their way out into the world, it's just something. So it was unexpected to me.
Well, because you didn't even I read that you weren't even aware when the Chicks cut Traveling Soldier. You didn't even know that was going down.
No, or Anger All the Time either, until they had already recorded it. Mm-hmm. And so, that was, that was just crazy, and didn't know what to expect, and didn't know what that was like, and man, the first time is just amazing and magical feeling,
The really funny thing to me though is, and it's been nice the last week getting to listen to the stuff with fresh ears, and it's like I guess Wrapped is a little bit different, the one for George Strait that went to #1, but with Traveling Soldier and Angry, like, I mean, who could have imagined that those would be the songs of yours that would take that path and go to #1? And I just want to know your philosophy on, it's almost like you have an anti-philosophy on, I just feel like you had no agenda writing those songs.
I agree with that. I agree, and I did. And I never had a good luck in kind of writing commercial songs to get them cut. Mm-hmm. And I figured that more up tempo or songs would get cut, and that it was surprising. I guess the only thing that isn't surprising about it is really what my influences were, and the Willie Nelson and Emmylou Harris songs, and were just ridiculously, incredibly sad songs, mm-hmm. and about Waylon Jennings, about these very intense emotional situations, and so that just had a real effect on me. Mm-hmm. And so those that ended up being some of the songs that I still write now. So that, I was surprised that happened, and man, that was so cool that those. And I'm not sure how many sad songs have been hit since then.
I was about to say, in a way, I don't know in 2016 if that could ever be the.
Yeah, I don't know. I've thought about that, Joe. I have.
But the pendulum does swing. It certainly isn't the case now that something like that could be a hit. But who knows in 2020 or 2025, people.
Right.
I don't know. People feel different about things. Again, that's something that I'll let you know the answer to later tonight after I've had a few.
When we work it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sad songs and waltzes aren't selling this year.
And then, Wrapped, you're one for George Strait. And first of all, that whole album of his is, in my opinion, like the last really great.
It's a good record.
Big Nashville country. I love that album so much, and the band on it is so good.
Yeah. I agree.
And but that song, it's funny. I genuinely believe that Wrapped could have been a #1 anytime between 1955 and 2005, but not since then, in a weird way. And who knows, it might come back around again.
It's a crazy thing, I do want to be engaged. I don't go to Nashville at all anymore. Mm-hmm. I feel very disengaged from that, and I was, and I always kind of kept it at arm's length. I loved going there, but I also loved approaching it from an outsider. There was a guy that I liked a lot. He just went by Costas. He wrote a bunch of songs that Patty Loveless cut, and he stayed like in Colorado or somewhere, and he was an inspiration. That it was like, maybe you don't have to live in Nashville, and I didn't want to live in Nashville, but I did have the feeling that they're just going to forget about me, mm-hmm. And so I wanted to approach it from an outsider's point of view, and be, proud to be like a Texan guy who, and mm-hmm. I still am really proud of that. Mm-hmm. And considering myself part of the Austin music scene, and trying to go up and make some noise there,
Yeah, in some ways you're part of a tradition there, because when Willie Nelson decided to tune out and drop out, he came down here and just, I've heard, I don't know if this is true or not, that his idea was like, fuck this town, I'm coming down to Austin and I'm just going to tour Texas and make a living.
I know, and he had big hits and stuff. Yeah. He's always an interesting story, man. I've done a lot of reading and know him a little bit, and he's such a hero and such an amazing guy. And and he came down here, and then the other dudes, I consider myself a part of that tradition of people like Rodney Crowell and Guy Clark and Chris Christopherson and that went to Nashville and tried to write really good songs and still get them on the radio.
Yeah.
And so Texas and Nashville, it's a troubled relationship.
It is, but it's an American tradition too. Right? It's been a really fruitful marriage.
Yep.
It really has. There's been a lot of great American music. Steve Earle too, same thing.
Sure.
I guess Lucinda Williams never really went to Nashville, but she.
Well, I mean, it really is the truth. I mean, they keep all the business there, and Nashville has such a. I mean, Texas has such a really great effect on the music that's there. Those songwriters, they changed the arc of what a good song was.
Absolutely.
And that's really inspiring.
You ever just sometime drop by the Wikipedia page of Lubbock, Texas, and look at all the fucking songwriters that came out of just Lubbock, Texas.
Yeah, there's the thing, you mentioned the Red Dirt guys, and who was it like, I'm a big fan of the Turnpike Troubadours and Evan Felker, and there's a guy, John Fulbright, they're from and then there's another new guy, Parker Millsap, I think is his name. They're all from real close to each other in Oklahoma.
They're Oklahoma guys, and there's another great guy coming up now named John Moreland, who's from that area as well.
And so I love that bit about these crazy little geographical places that just kind of happen, and then you wonder why and how, and Tulsa when that happened years ago, and Lubbock and Austin and so that's it's a really cool thing, which I think makes sense in some way.
There is. My wife and I are both from in between Baltimore and DC, and in Maryland there was a succession of these guitar players that came out for a while. It was
like Danny Gatton,
Fahey, John Fahey, Nils Lofgren, and Roy, what's his name? I'll remember it as soon as we turn off the mics.
And lesser known, Evan Johns, who came out of there, but was really an amazing roots guitarist, and was one of the reasons that my wife moved to Austin and was part of that scene. Although he didn't quite, was not as well known as those other ones, but was definitely a DC area, amazing guitar player.
Yeah.
And it's they must affect each other, and who knows how that happens.
Roy Buchanan. There's two principal ways to record music, and the merits of one over the other have been the source of some of the most mind-numbing Star Wars versus Star Trek arguments that I've ever had the misfortune of hearing. At the end of the day, they're just two different sets of tools to do the same job. I'll give you the shorthand difference. The first method manipulates sound with an array of hardware, amplifiers, compressors, and delays. That sound is then printed onto magnetic tape. The hardware is either part of a mixing board's channel strip or is a standalone unit collectively known as outboard gear. The magnetic tape is literally just that. 3M, the same company that makes your run-of-the-mill Scotch tape, also produced the magnetic reels for recording. And engineers who wanted to make an edit literally had to slice the tape with a razor blade and then mend it back together. This method is known as analog, and it's what every pre-1980s album you've ever heard was recorded with. The second method is digital. The sound manipulation is performed by computer algorithms known as plugins that model their hardware counterparts. That sound is then printed to an audio file in a computer's software. It's been around for quite some time. Bell Laboratories was putting sound onto a computer as early as the 1950s, but it wasn't used for a commercially released album until 1979, on Ry Cooder's regrettably titled album, Bop Till You Drop. It's taken a long while for the digital medium to catch up with the musicality of analog, but the last 10 years have been a real revolution, and I'd say it's pretty much there now. I'm not saying that there isn't a difference. I'm not saying that there aren't people that can't hear that difference. I am saying that the people who can actually hear it are an order of magnitude fewer than those who claim they can. Perhaps the one thing that digital cannot recreate from the analog realm are the limitations it placed on musicians that became a source of great creativity. The work happened at a slower pace, required more focus and patience, and generally demanded greater musicianship from the people being recorded. And that's why the analog method has always appealed to Bruce, and it's why it's central to his own studio and his workflow to this day. And in the last 10 years, you've been more of a small business owner in a lot of ways, and or not small business owner, business owner. Yeah. And one of the things you've done is you've built out a studio of your own that you work out of. Can you kind of describe the reason for doing that and the process in which you put it together?
Well, I've always been kind of chasing this a more raw sound that the digital revolution has kind of always thrown me for a loop, and so the stuff that I like working with myself is magnetic tape, and so we record out there. I record in different kind of places, but I've got a place in Lockhart. Which is, and we do a lot of video and we record songs, and I just, my thing is all about the song. It always has been, and so we just try and keep it real simple and have it be capturing a performance and telling a story, and have a website called The Next Waltz, and we record singles and we record interviews and do just about anything. Try and embrace the technology of the internet, where you can put out anything that you want to. It can be a song, it can be a video, it can be a podcast or a blog or whatever it is. The challenge is to be interesting and creative.
It is. I still am convinced 10 or 15 years from now I'll be telling the younger generation, like, there was a time when you could self-publish before they took the internet away from us. You know what I mean? Or they'll be saying to us, man, you guys really had it made in those internet days. Yeah. The internet just seems too good for them to let us keep. The Donald will probably end up taking it from us. We'll
Maybe
see.
So. Yeah, it's a little unwieldy.
Can you kind of explain to people, not the technical sounding difference, but the workflow difference between doing a session that's digital and one that is more analog into tape?
Well, there's a couple things. I mean, one thing, you can you use your eyes a lot with digital, which is not good for me. I need to disconnect my eyes and just see with my ears. And so digital recording always has something for you to look at, and you can, maybe it looks like a mistake even though it doesn't sound like one, and if you follow me. And so it simplifies. You need to just make it right and leave some of the rough edges in, and it's just kind of slowing everything down a little bit, and it's just, personally, it's the way that I like recording, and the way that I kind of like hanging out as well, and it has it just feels like and there was a time when that stuff was brand new, it was space age recording, but now it feels like an old hammer or something like that. That's just a tool that you use, but it's hard for me to put my finger on it. I enjoy the microphones and the technology of recording, but only within a kind of certain era of technology, and so it's kind of a funny situation. Also, I wondered sometimes that I think you can be influenced by the sound that you fell in love with music of, and that it is similar to how film does with in the movies, that maybe digital recording is more real, and maybe it's a little too real for me. And that's going on even with video now, where when I see things and I'm like, God, that looks like a Mexican soap opera. It's too, it's jarring. I want to see, a soft focus and shadows, and so it's kind of just where I'm coming from,
The best description for listeners who aren't kind of familiar with that difference is, if you used to watch a TV show like Seinfeld back in the day, and then you flip on your TV now and there's a rerun on and they've re-released it in HD, and you're like, what the fuck? Why are there a bunch of actors on a set right here? Because I think what Bruce is talking about there is, it's just, even though it might be a truer representation of what those cameras were actually seeing, you might not necessarily want a truer representation.
Well, it's a weird question, isn't it? I mean, you want to lose yourself in this story of that film or in that music, and so there's all kinds of things that can pull you out of that space and put you back in reality, which is not where you want to be. You want to be in there, and so it's. And now we're heading into virtual reality, and I suppose that's gonna be widespread, and it's fascinating, man. It really is.
It is.
So we're trying to completely embrace technology in that, man, we can have this. We don't have to wait for 2 years to put it out. We can put it out tomorrow. We can put it out now. We can have interaction about it. So you can. You can use the technology in one regard, and then also you can do things video-wise that would have cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars 20 years ago. So, but it's just, you have to know how to do it, and you have to know what you're doing, and you still got to be creative. I mean, I know that for a fact.
I think also what listeners who aren't familiar with the way that audio production works, when Bruce was saying sometimes you end up listening with your eyes a lot. Basically, the idea is now digital recording has gotten to a point, and this is amazing, but you can highlight a track that you just recorded, and with an algorithm and a couple presses of a button, every strike can be right on the grid, right in time, on a metronomic with metronomic precision. Not only vocals can be tuned, but the strum of a guitar, you can go inside the strum and tune a particular string or a particular note while keeping other ones the same. I think it was Steve Albini that said, if you had the time and the budget, any idiot could make a quote-unquote perfect record where everything was in tune. And so
my position is that stuff might be good for certain types of music and bad for other types of music.
And I think I would agree. I think now that it's so cheap, I mean, this technology comes in a MacBook off the shelf now. So if that technology and that ability is so ubiquitous, what becomes art now is your choices, not into what to make perfect. Your voice kind of comes out now into what to leave unperfect at this point, you know?
Yeah, it's but I think technology does exactly what it's always done, which is make it easier to be mediocre. And so I think it's always taken tons of work to be really good at whatever you do, but the technology of the time will get you to where, oh, nope, I'm a photographer in 10 minutes, you know? But it still takes a lot of work to really be good at whatever you want to do. I believe that.
Absolutely. And I think our business got hit by technology first, but I think, you were talking about virtual reality. I think besides that, we have a lot of automation that's going to be coming. You and I both live in Austin, and if you go to the grocery store up in the Mueller development, sometimes you get caught behind the Google self-driving car that's up there now. And so while I think we were the first business to get hit with it, certainly aren't going to be the last. And fast forward 10 or 15 years from now, and I think kind of creating cultural worth might be one of the last jobs that actually has some value to it, because it's by definition the one thing that a computer cannot do.
Right.
Who's a non-musical hero of yours?
A non-musical hero? Steve Martin.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Those of us who have anything to do with like the entertainment, any aspect of it, man, to be in like a one thing and then to move into another thing and to even have unsuccessful times and recreate yourself in a different kind of a creative place and find other things and continuously like moving forward. Most of them, I can think of other people have a similar thing like that where they left that behind, where most of us are just clinging to whatever was successful before and trying to find a way back, so those are the people that really blow my mind, that continue to move and to have that kind of confidence and to keep moving and to make it interesting.
Because he was at the height of his stand-up career, effectively playing stadiums, and then he was just like, cool, done with that. Hasn't done stand-up since, I don't think. Has written a couple great. I've only read his autobiography, but I thought the writing was great, and I guess he's written a couple novels as well.
I think so, and he's made some different kind of films, and then when you look back on it, you can kind of take him for granted sometimes, and then he can make just some goofy kids movies that, you hope he got paid for, but man, then you can go back and look at something, and there's really, really cool stuff, and it's ups and downs and in betweens, and I know that I could come up with some other people. That's what I like. Is somebody who it's hard not to listen to those people. Telling you got to go back and follow some other thing, and so that's inspiring. That's really cool.
It is hard not to listen to those people, because the moment that you hit that first stumble with the new path, you get a lot of, see, I told you if you had, and that's to move past that is tough.
God, there's some scene in a Woody Allen movie where it's like death comes or something, and at some point he says to Woody Allen, "I preferred your earlier work," and And everybody goes through that, and we, it's back to a theme. You always, in some ways, you wish you knew what you didn't know then. But this is a great job. It really is, Man.
Well, hey, thanks for driving over today.
Oh, yeah.
I really appreciate it.
It's about 6 blocks, man. No problem.
That's our show for this month. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed it, as I mentioned at the top, please rate the show on iTunes and maybe give us a subscription. We'd appreciate it. Big thanks to Cole Vestlage for helping me connect with Bruce and make this interview possible. Bruce's newest venture, a video documentary series, The Next Waltz, featuring Jerry Jeff Walker and the Turnpike Troubadours, is now available on YouTube. Today's episode was engineered by Matt Schusler. If before we meet again, you sit down to write, please remember, an expensive microphone is not a song, a compelling Instagram account is not a song, and most importantly, reverb is not a song. So let all that take care of itself, and for you, just keep your eye on the song.